Hey gang, welcome to another special IG Live. I am Hector Luis Alamo, Senior Editor here at Latino Rebels. Today I'm going to be talking to the Water Drop Director for Border Kindness. If you've been following their work online like I have, seen their work, heard about their work, they're the group that does water drops for, one of the things they do is water drops for migrants who are crossing the desert. And as you know, record temperatures. If you've ever read The Devil's Highway, famous book about the crossing between Sonora and Arizona, The Land of Open Graves by Professor Jason DeLeon. I had him on my old podcast, anthropologist, professor of anthropology out of California. Let me bring her on so she can tell you what they do. I'm super excited to use this platform to call attention to crucial work, humanitarian work, if I dare say so. So I hope, let's see if I can. Hello, hello.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Let me just, I was just telling everybody about the work that Border Kindness does. If you want to introduce yourself and talk, give a bit introduction about for Border Kindness, and we'll get chatting. Thank you so much for doing this, by the way.
Thank you for having us on. So quick introduction. Myself, my name is Jacqueline Arellano. I'm the co-director of the Water Drop program for Border Kindness. I have this program going with my partner, James Cordero, and we've been doing water drops in the desert here in California since 2016. And just a little over a year ago, we brought our program over to Border Kindness, who we had already been working with for quite some time. Border Kindness is based primarily in Mexicali, in Baja California. We have a number of programs on the Mexico side. The organization was created in response to the migrant caravans that were arriving in 2018. And Mexicali being next to Imperial County in the kind of lesser served area of the border region in California. The organization was founded in response to there being a humanitarian aid crisis that was not being recognized either by media or just the community in general, because people didn't really notice what was going on. There was no attention to the Imperial County Mexicali border. So the water drop program we've been doing since 2016, as I said, and every single week we have a team that hikes water, food, and protective clothing into the desert. And it has been an intense several years doing that, and it's only getting more intense every day.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought that up, because most people who know about migrant crossings, they know about Texas, right? Or they know about the Sonoran into Arizona crossing, the infamous Devil's Highway, right?
Right.
But not, yeah, I can admit that I haven't heard a lot about the arduous journey of crossing from, what would that be? Also Sonora, right? Sonora and Baja into California.
It's Baja California into California.
And what said? I mean, I went to Coachella last year, so the only way I know about the Imperial Valley is that we stayed in an Airbnb right by the Salton Sea, and yeah, it's pretty desolate. It looks kind of like Mad Max out there.
For sure. It is one of the least resourced areas in California, one of the least known areas in California, even here in San Diego, where I currently live. I'm from the Imperial Valley, so it's very close to my heart. The rural desert is kept that way for a reason. So there is not just the labor resource that is exploited in our communities, but also the land, as we know. So the rural border is, at least in California and parts of Arizona, largely agricultural. So it's kept that way for a reason. Like keeping an exploitable labor force is really important for everybody that's making money off of like the labor that our people are generating, right?
Yeah.
And the Imperial Valley is one of those areas that doesn't really get talked about, because there are people that really benefit from that area being as poor as it is. And that's, you know, whether it's extricating resources from the land via agriculture, or literally the like mining that's going on. So
Yeah, it's an interesting tangent and an important one, right? Because like again, the Imperial Valley doesn't get talked about a lot. So I mean, let's explore this tangent. I like this. You know, give us a little bit of history about the Imperial Valley. Like the thing that struck me is that we had our Airbnb right by the Salton Sea, as I said, like you can see it, and there was nothing around. And then obviously right by where Coachella's at in Indio, there's Palm Springs, which is like, you know, one of the fanciest resort places in California, or in the West Coast at least. So explain like a little bit about that history and like why it's being kept that way.
So it is one of, at least for Southern California, one of the main agricultural regions of the area. And there aren't really many industries there, except those that are sort of extracting, like we said, like extract from the land via either agriculture, or like where you are at over there by Salton Sea right now, like the big thing is lithium mining. And there is a lot of taking from the land that occurs there, and not a lot of giving back. So the community is largely the community is left under resourced, because when people don't have anything. Oh, okay, you still hear me? I think you're frozen. I don't know if that's on my end. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we're good.
Yeah, we're good. Sorry.
I mean, like I was saying, like the community's left really poor. It's left really vulnerable. So people can just, they are forced into to working these jobs, like labor jobs, like agriculture, and making money for other people, large companies that actually don't give anything back to the community. So it's like this big vicious cycle that occurs. Why I bring it up when it comes to migration is that sort of like unresourced trend that happens in the rural border really extends to the story of migration. Because even like, for instance, when our organization started in 2018, there was rightfully a lot of attention on Tijuana. So a lot of caravans were arriving to the Tijuana border, but because like the media is based largely in LA, it's easy for them to come down to San Diego, cross to Tijuana, get all the footage that they need, and leave. And that's usually kind of how it goes down with the border. Like people come down from the city, they come down in gawk, they get their information, they get their data, and then they leave. Well, the Imperial Valley, they didn't even make it down there.
Right.
And there's just such an untold story about the area. And you were asking like about the history. This goes back like, I mean, when the land was first being quote unquote developed. You know, when the railroad started in Mexicali, that's like when Border Patrol occurred. So Border Patrol was founded to keep Chinese laborers out that built the railroad in Mexicali. So these racist policies that Border Patrol was literally founded on were founded in order to keep people working in this area and keep people like sheltered from any other opportunities. And that continues to this day. The area is still like that. And so what we're trying to do, I'll get into what we do in the desert, but what we're trying to do basically, like as an organization with all of our programs, is to provide resources in an area that there aren't any, for a community that doesn't really get reached.
Yeah, because I saw you also did like, you go to where day laborers are looking for work, and you give them, you know, heat protective clothing, water. You also gave them one of the recent posts I saw, the yellow kind of construction outfits, because they said if we have the gear, if we look like we're ready to work, we get picked easier. So you guys are even going the little details of that, of providing that, which I thought was so smart.
We feel really strongly about giving people what they want and what they need. So not coming over there and just giving people what we think that they
Right.
need. And we're actually communicating with folks. We're trying to build community. They remember us. They request things. And that was the number one thing. They were like, well, we need to be outfitted to work. There's a sort of cycle of migration that occurs in the area. So people first cross in to the country, like through the border, and then when they arrive here, I think that's sort of like where the story stops. You know, like we don't really hear about like how are people getting it together and surviving and integrating into the community. And that is like a story that I think a lot of our families lived, but it's really not one that gets talked about very often. So for the day labor outreach program, like a lot of those folks are recent arrivals, and a lot of those folks are still living unhoused. So there's rural canyons out in San Diego County where folks will live until they kind of get on their feet. And so we're trying to provide whatever support that we can in order for them to help themselves. We're not like really helping anybody. We're just, you know, sharing resources.
And then, and you still, I mean, like I said, everybody knows about when they think of the border, they think of Texas, and when they think of border security and the talk of border security, they think of Texas. But as you mentioned, it did start in California, right? I mean, that's where Clinton started. Bill Clinton started building the wall, right, in San Diego. What is it? Operation Gatekeeper, all that stuff, and talk about the conditions. I mean, you guys are doing this hike every week. I see that, temperatures get up to one. I'm in Vegas, so I know what 110 in the morning means. I know exactly what that means. So, but like, yeah, talk about the terrain. I mean, talk about what is the route that, and I don't want to call anybody up, but we know, the Devil's Highway. We know a few other routes. What is the route from Mexico into Southern California that most migrants take?
Because of those measures that you're talking about, the so-called prevention through deterrence policies that were implemented, bipartisan efforts since the Clinton administration in the 90s, it is a forced, very, very rugged terrain. So in California, people technically, were it not for like the wall and checkpoints and the electronic surveillance that's going up and all of the so-called deterrence strategies that are being implemented, people would just be able to literally walk a couple miles from the borderline to the road. But because these 30-foot walls and checkpoints and everything has been implemented in like the more survivable regions, people are being pushed into the mountains. So what we have in California is mountainous terrain. And in the desert floor in the Imperial Valley, it is like the Ocotillo region. I don't know if you've been familiar. Like if you drop in from like San Diego into the Imperial Valley on your way to Arizona, you'll see it, those just giant hills of boulders. People are having to navigate through that, and that's intentional. So when they put up these walls and started implementing prevention through deterrence, they said that they were going to use nature as an ally. So the intention was to funnel people to their deaths, and it has been occurring. Every single year is more deadly than the last. And that's been happening here in California at an increasing rate. Because what would be like a 4 or 5 mile kind of day hike basically turns into 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles. And there's no way that you can carry enough water. And what we're also seeing now is like, sort of like as everything culminates globally and like the migration crisis is getting worse and worse all over the world, people are arriving to our border and crossing that are not from the area, that are not even from the global south. So there is an increase in like a lack of preparation into this area. You have to be set up to do this. You have to have the right gear. They're not going to REI. They're not getting even like the right shoes or backpacks.
I shouldn't laugh, but yeah, they're not going to REI. That's for sure. Yeah.
We're finding dress shoes, chanclas, a Calimax bag with like a 16-ounce bottle of water in it. Like, because people are not informed even when they arrive at the line. They're being told by coyotes, it's only a mile.
Yeah, they don't
it's 2 miles.
Realize how big it is either, right? They don't realize how big the desert is or how hot.
Or how hot. So a lot of people are just really ill-equipped, more so than we've ever seen, and that's being reflected in the deaths. So like I said, every single year is more deadly than the last. Last year was the most deaths on record ever, and that's who's been recorded. So
I
it
was
was
just gonna say, I mean, if you read Land of Open Graves by Professor Jason De Leon, you know, he was the first. We knew that migrants were dying in the desert, but it's still up to this day. We don't know how many, because he did an experiment in his book where he takes the corpse of a pig, right, dresses it up and leaves it out in the desert to see how fast the desert consumes it, and it's very fast. So the theory is that there's migrants dying that we don't even ever hear about ever. So it's probably like 5 times the official record.
we literally can't even get our heads around it. Like we have been out we've gone out with No More Deaths before in Arizona and just done a search, and in one weekend came across 5 sets of remains. It's unconceivable how many deaths there are, and in the area where we are, where it's so mountainous, like people will literally just go missing and never be found again. Like they could be anywhere. They can be in a cave, their remains get scattered. I mean, it's incredibly violent, and basically like if these policies were meant to deter and not kill, then they would have been rolled back. But
Yeah,
instead,
it's pretty gross the way
what's
it's pretty
that?
it's pretty gross the way the federal government says, "Oh, we're not killing these people. It's the desert. It's nature killing them." But it's like if you set up a fence and the only way to get through is through a, you know, shark infested waters, and you're saying, "Oh, I'm not killing them. It's the sharks." But no, you're driving them there.
So even like in Texas, because right now it's like eyes on Texas, it's like always the media attention starts to kind of shift through this thing that has never stopped. It gives the impression that every time like there's a new wave of media attention, I think it gives like the national psyche the impression that there has been a relief in between there, but it hasn't. It's only getting worse. The only thing that's changed during the Biden administration is that there's less attention. So right now, because Greg Abbott is trying to get like all his clout and everything, there's a lot of attention on what's going on in Texas with like the buoys and the increase in drownings that are occurring in the river. 2 migrants were found dead on the Mexican side, and they're exactly as you said. The counterpoint that they have is that they drowned further down the river. Well, the buoys are being placed where the water is accessible, so where it's like shin high and there aren't dangerous currents. So even if it's not that they died exactly there, they drowned because they could not walk across the river. And the only people breaking the law is the US government by impeding asylum. So it's really dire right now. You mentioned the climate. That's another thing that's not just driving global migration, but also making this work incredibly difficult. So we're getting more and more people arriving because climate change is occurring all over the world. So
And
we have to
and
focus,
just let me just add just real quick, you know, we should add also that, you know, these people are leaving places. You know, my family's from Honduras. You know, Honduras is going through a terrible drought. The coffee crop is failing, and it's because of developed, you know, North America, you know, the United States, Canada, Europe, the polluters of the world are causing this climate crisis that is being borne on the poorer, less developed countries, and then they're having to flee, and then we don't let them in. We set fire to their house and we don't let them in. And anyway, sorry, just wanted to
no,
add that.
exactly. And that's happening everywhere. And we've talked to people, like we just talked about day labor. I talked to a man, it was a while back, I think over the winter, I talked to him and he was telling me, yeah, I'm only here because like there's no, you know, these big companies came, they bought the land, and we were all struggling with our little plot, and then the plot doesn't give anymore. They're like, so I had to come over here. People don't want to, but they're being pushed. And this is all over the world.
Yeah, no, nobody
So
wants to come here. The other thing that I think non-Latinos don't know is that, you know, every Latino, we talk about the old country like it's paradise, but we had to leave, either a combination, politics, economics, environment, and all of those politics, economic, environment, all of that is U.S. policy, right? Like the farms wouldn't have failed in Mexico recently if it wasn't for NATO, right? Nobody wants to leave paradise. They come to Chicago like my ancestors did, leaving beautiful Honduras, leaving beautiful Puerto Rico because of U.S. policies,
Yeah, yeah, it's nobody's dream to end up like working in a chicken plant in Kansas, but that's where a lot of people are ending up. And it's not anybody's dream to be ripped from their families. It's not anybody's dream to be separated from their kids. All kinds of like the just layers and generations of trauma that our community has sustained was nobody's dream. And it is just expanding in a way that being from the border, I know that when you're sort of immersed in militarization and violence, you kind of become numb to it. And what's concerning is that I'm seeing that sort of spread all over the country. The more that we talk about migration in this way that is like as if it's like the border's separate, like the border is its own little country, right? The border is like its own thing. We don't have any responsibility for it. The people that come through there and the people that die there, they don't count. That's sort of how it's talked about. And there's this anesthetization that's occurring like in the country, even like within our communities, like where it's like, oh, did you hear this drowning happened in Texas? Oh, did you hear the deaths are the worst that it's ever been? But it's like this all hands on deck situation, but the hands aren't there. It's really tough to get this work done at a time where the stakes are only getting higher and higher and higher. And we're like over here trying to like plug holes in something that's sinking. And I just really want people to understand that all of this is by design, and we are literally all our community has. There is no intervention in any level. Like the aid that's being provided, especially in the rural border, is grassroots organizations like ours, comprised
and Priscilla's a mutual friend of ours. She's saying, what are your needs? What does Border Kindness need from the public?
So definitely following our work, sharing about what's going on. Currently, we are not accepting volunteers in the desert for the next few weeks because we're going through a hardcore heat wave right now. So we've been getting a lot of folks signing up to come to the desert. You are so needed and so welcome to do that. And we do want people to come out. It's just right now, it's so intensely hot. It's at over 120 degrees every time we go out. So we're trying to let that kind of abate a little bit before we start bringing in new people. We just need people to engage with what's happening, share about what's happening, sign up to volunteer. And we're also going to be having like continued opportunities to volunteer and be a part of. So the Water Drops is just one program that we have. We also have the Day Labor Outreach Program. We have the kind of like migrant support program that we are having in the Imperial Valley, where we provide food support and know your rights information and medical rights information to migrants in the Imperial Valley and surrounding areas. There is just no organized government aid for people that are being kept in these areas. So that's the best way I think to support, is to just engage with our work and stay in contact with us. We obviously do always need financial support. Sometimes it is easiest to like kick down a few dollars, and like that's why we brought our program over to Border Kindness. We felt so in line with their mission that anytime that we receive resources, like those resources are translated into the community and program development in helping people directly. So that's
talk a bit about, I'm interested in like how you got started doing this and how you teamed up with Border Kindness, how Border Kindness got started. I mean, where does this?
Oh yeah. So I got started totally on a whim. We were with a previous organization. I heard about it on like social media, kind of similar to this. There was like water drops that were starting. I'm from the area, so I was like interested. I signed up and I started coming out. Within a few months, I think as the summer kicked in, like the people that were able to hang in the heat started continuing to show up. We started collaborating. My partner and I James. He's like a very outdoorsy person. I was not. I had no hiking experience. I just had my heart in it. Literally, like I always tell people, like I came out in like Chucks with like no hat, and it was like 115 degrees, but I was just like, whatever, I can hang, I can do this. And he's the one that's like a hiker. So we met, we started collaborating and building this program up. And just like for the first few years, spent all of our free time wandering around in the desert and just trying to find routes of migration, leaving supplies, going and checking on supplies. Where are they being consumed? Where are they not being consumed? Little by little, we started collaborating with other organizations that are doing the same work, but in other areas, and getting tips from them and just building community. I got started in it because it does hit close to home. My dad crossed at a time where it was a lot more survivable, but he does always tell me stories of just how scared he was and how dangerous and terrifying it was in the 70s. Now push forward to the border being essentially completely militarized, it is beyond dangerous to cross, and it's incredibly expensive to do safely. So when people cannot afford that safety, they're just doing like this deadly Hail Mary and putting their life at risk. Border Kindness started a couple years after like I kind of got involved in border work, and I met the founder Kelly through just talking to folks, and they said, hey, like, have you talked to this guy that started this organization in Mexicali? He literally just drove to Mexicali and was helping folks out because he saw on the news that people were arriving. He saw that there were people stranded, families stranded in parks with nothing. No aid was arriving. So he just drove himself down from Joshua Tree to the Imperial Valley, crossed into Mexicali, and was handing out food. And ever since then, Border Kindness has been operating and expanding. So wherever there has been a need, we try to find a way to support. So like for instance, during the pandemic, when there was a huge lack of healthcare, especially for the migrant and asylum seeking community in Mexicali, there was no access for folks that aren't Mexican to receive healthcare. So we started a health clinic, and people were receiving pro bono healthcare in downtown Mexicali. So it's been several years of that, of providing services wherever they're most needed in an area, because there is no organized assistance on either side of the border, whether it's in Mexico or in the Imperial Valley. There is not like a sustainable aid effort that is being provided. It is all grassroots.
It's interesting that you said that you brought the healthcare thing, because I'm from Chicago. I just moved to Vegas 5-7 years ago. And it's interesting how I know this older white man, Fox News watching white man, Trump voting white man. He's got money, but he's cheap. So like when he wanted to get some teeth work done, he goes down to Mexico. Mm-hmm. Like I think Mexicali, just goes to Mexicali, and there's. So what I wanted to say was like it's messed up the way that the border is porous for Americans. We can go down there and get whatever we want and take whatever we want and whatever services we need. But the people who want to come up here and work, they don't want to take anything. They just want to work. They want to not only provide for themselves, but provide for the country, right?
Yes.
That door is closed off to them. It's insane. And people don't realize, I was in Chicago, like I said, and I didn't realize how hot the desert is in the Southwest. And, just as an anecdote, we're still in a heat wave. It's going to be 114 today, I think, here in Vegas. And, you can't walk your dog at night. You can walk your dog in the morning, but you can't walk your dog at night, even after sunset, because the ground is still so hot. So I'm saying this to everybody who's not from the Southwest. Like, it's really hot. Like, it's baking hot. It's not like a hot day in Chicago, a hot day in New York, or anything like that. It's unbearable. And so the fact that this is U.S. immigration policy to funnel migrants, families, kids into these regions is, a crime against humanity, right? But nobody says nobody says that against the United States ever. Right? We're never going to get charged with crimes against humanity, but it is what it is.
It's very much like a form of indenturing workers too, to keep them in these communities. One of the prevention through deterrent strategies is having the checkpoints, right? I don't know if you guys have gone through checkpoints, like when it's just such a common occurrence when you're in the border. You can't be driving down the freeway without going through a checkpoint.
Or 100 miles from that. It's weird. Like you're like 100 miles from the border and you're being checked by Border Patrol. And it's weird as an American, I got to say, you know, my American privilege was showing. I'm like, how dare you ask me for my papers? I'm like, not even anywhere near the border, you know?
Exactly. And they'll ask to search your car and they ask to see ID, and they don't have a right to do that, but they don't tell you that they don't have the right to do that. The other violence of the checkpoints is that it keeps people where they are. And like that's what I was talking about, where it keeps labor where it is needed, where it can be extracted from. So like where you were at in Coachella, that area of like Mecca, Thermal, all of that agricultural area, it is largely undocumented indigenous migrants that are doing this labor that creates billions of dollars for the agricultural industry, right? But that checkpoint is not just there to keep people out, it's there to keep people in, just like the walls, just like the border. So if they make it so difficult for you to even move, for you to even live, you're just going to have to exist in your little bubble with your head down working. And that is all by design. So people are being exploited by design, and they're being kind of corralled by these policies, by these structures. And I saw Priscilla asking, like, what's the difference between Biden and Trump? It's PR, basically. It's nothing is different. If anything, like the deadliest years on record for border crossings have occurred during the Biden administration. Were that to occur, and I mean, I'm not defending any politician, but I am calling attention to our own sort of collective apathy. Once a Democrat came into office, there was less
urgency
that people were feeling to support even. So you have no organized government response to this humanitarian crisis. There is like way less attention and pressure. Everybody thinks the crisis is over. Yeah. And the aid organizations that are scrambling all over the border to just save people's lives are doing so with a fraction of the resources coming in from the community, because everybody thinks it's like no big deal, it's done. You know, Trump's out of office, it's done. What we're terrified about, knowing this trend, is that every election cycle, there is some sort of spectacle, like a violent spectacle that is constructed on the border. We saw when Title 42 ended recently, that was the big invasion rhetoric was being pushed around and said that there was going to be a huge invasion at the border of migrants and such. Well, the invasion didn't occur. So what happened? They manufactured it. They were just not processing people. And we were one of the organizations that assisted on the ground in the rural town of Pacumba here in California. There was about 1,800 people just stranded in the desert for a week. Toddlers, families, everybody. And that's how they got their footage of this spectacle of like, look at all these people invading. And it's scary to be on the cusp of an election cycle and to already be sort of mentally thinking, what's next? How are they going to use people as pawns in order to further their political narrative? How are people going to be put at risk? And we need to get ahead of that. And that's what, like, when they were saying, how can, you support this work? Like, we just ask people to stay engaged, stay active, stay in community with us, because we're the first response. Like, not just us, but like everybody that's involved in this conversation currently, like, we're it. And it's sort of mind-boggling to really kind of wrap our heads around that at a time where like it seems like everything's kind of falling apart in this like perfect storm. We are all we have. So we have to stay engaged with one another in order to respond to this. So it's pretty scary. I don't know what's going to happen next year when the election cycle happens. It's always a really convenient political tactic to talk about migration from both sides.
Yeah.
because the Democrats will be, proposing a more humanitarian solution like digital surveillance instead of walls and that sort of thing. That's not really helpful. And the right will be pushing identity based, like hateful rhetoric. So it's tough. It's tough to break through all of that and center the struggle of the people that are actually living this and say, what are their needs? How can we meet those needs?
Yeah, I mean the frustrating thing for me has been as a political observer or whatever is for years now. I know a lot of Latinos that say who are progressive consider themselves progressive, but they don't worry about things because they say, oh, somebody's taking care of that, right? Somebody will save the planet. Somebody will take care of the migrants.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing with Democrats in office, yeah, again, Clinton started this whole border security thing in the 90s, right? And Obama built, people who've been watching this probably sound like a broken record. Obama built the cages that Trump put those kids in. And I almost prefer a Republican in office in the White House because I feel like people vote a Democrat in and they go, that's my
Exactly.
good deed for the next 4 years. Everything's okay. And when there's a Republican in office, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's watching the government. And when there's a Democrat in office, progressives are like, oh, well, we can relax. We have our friends. Our friends are taking care of things. No, the government, I don't care what party. The government's never your friend, right? The government, they're all friends with each other. Or Biden's only doing this technological, what does he call it? The border security. He's calling it like a technological border, like a technical border, but it's only to funnel money to the military industrial complex, right? So it has nothing to do with being more humane or anything. But yeah, we'll see what happens next year. It looks like it's going to be, which is mind boggling to me, it's going to be Trump and Biden again, I think, or Trump or Biden and DeSantis.
Oh my God.
I can't believe they're running Biden again because he's just not, I don't know who it would be, but Biden's not it. And the my fear that they're just going to be apathy and they're gonna put in a DeSantis. Like Trump was, he did a terrible things, but he had no real plan. DeSantis has a plan, right? He wants to inflict pain on immigrant communities, right? And so, but then, what do you do as an advocate? What are you going to say to people next year when it's time to go vote? What are you going to tell them about the Democrats? What are you going to tell them about Biden?
We just always emphasize the reality of the situation. And like we said, like we center the people that are the most vulnerable, the people that are struggling the most. I think when and this is just like we as an organization, like what we have been the most invested in is direct aid. And that's what we have to be able to focus on. There is a lot of conversation to be had whether direct aid should be involved in like political discourse. Everything is political. Of course, we have to be involved in political discourse. What we want people to be aware of, though, is like outside of the political discourse, people are suffering. Like as we're having like these debates, and next year, as like all of the focus is on like these debates and these candidates and this and that, people are dropping dead in the desert. People are dying of preventable disease because they can't get out of their farm town to go to a doctor because of a checkpoint, that kind of thing. So next year, when we're talking about these things, it's like important to illuminate the people that don't have any attention on them. They're giving us everything and aren't being provided with so little in return. And I think it's our role to be a platform to get them their needs met and have safety and protection shared with them. It's complicated because we do see sometimes like folks get justifiably very involved in what's happening politically or what's happening with Border Patrol or what's happening with this and that. All of those reasons are why we're here. We would not have this global migration crisis were it not for just global government corruption and everybody that's benefited from late stage capitalism up until now and in the future. But at the end of the day, when we say like, you know, what are we up to? Like I said, we're plugging holes. We're out there, we're just strapping backpacks on and hiking out in 120-degree heat and trying to tell the truth of what's going on.
Well, I think I speak for everybody watching that, you know, I'm super grateful that people like you are out there doing it. And I hope that, you know, I'm going to share some information on how people can help you guys do what you do, keep doing what you do. And yeah, I mean, the whole thing with immigration reform is that it, you know, the immigration law, keeping people undocumented hurts the United States. I've seen so many undocumented immigrants get their green card and then, or get their, and then get their citizenship even, and then they get credit, then they buy a house, then they start businesses, then they become a part of, like, you know, building the economy. But like you said, when you're undocumented, when you're forced to remain undocumented, it's just keep your head down, you know, do your work, and America suffers in the end. You know, you
Absolutely.
want everybody who's here, you want them to have be a full member of the American community, if you can say that, right, with full rights and full capabilities, right? These people are a lot of some of these people cross the Darien jungle. They cross, you know, Panama, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, then the desert. Like, these people are not ambitious, right? These people are doers, and so give them everything they need to do whatever it is that in them to do. And the fact that we handicap people or hobble them is pretty crazy and pretty sadistic, and you know, it just ends up, you know, stabbing ourselves in the foot. It's sad. But let everybody know where they can follow your guys' work and how they can contribute.
So following our work on social media is a really good way to stay kind of up to date with what we're up to, and any opportunities that we have to get involved, which will be, with respect to the desert, opening up very soon. I think as soon as like the end of this month, I'm going to start taking kind of first timers. My question for you is when you're going to come out to the desert, now that you're very acclimated. So when are you going to come to a water drop?
All right. We're in contact now, so I think there's a water drop in my future for sure. I know Priscilla was planning. I don't want to give anything away, but she told me that she was thinking of something like that too. She was coordinating with you. It'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to do that. I mean, I've read about it, and you know, I want to go see for myself, right?
Absolutely. So we go out every weekend, at least once a weekend, at least one route a weekend, unless it's like snow and flooding, and regardless of the weather, we're out there. So people can stay involved by following us on social media, sharing regarding like our work, the work of the other organizations that we're in collaboration with, sort of like the current state of affairs. There is a link in our bio, like a link tree with wish lists that have items for day labor outreach for our school in Mexicali. So we have a school where it's the Children Empowerment Center in Mexicali, where kids are receiving educational support, food support, all kinds of things. Right?
Martial arts, swimming, all kinds of stuff.
All things, not just surviving, like they're thriving. And, you know, that's where we want to prevent as many people as possible from having to risk their lives in the desert. So if we can make people's lives more sustainable on the other side of the border, to make it so like their children don't have to cross in order to survive, then that is, you know, that's life preservation, is having these kids go to school and thrive and be happy and not have to do that rite of passage that way too many people in our families and in our communities have done, of taking to the desert and possibly dying. So we have wish lists and things for the school. We also have continuous updates of what's happening with our migrant family support in the Imperial Valley and all kinds of things. So just follow us on social media at Border Kindness. Check out the link tree. There is a link to sign up for volunteer opportunities. So if people are interested in doing that, reach out to us via DM if you have any specific questions, and we'll answer those. But just staying engaged and staying involved past just like the sharing of things. I think sometimes we doom scroll, we share things, we get overwhelmed. All of us get overwhelmed by how much we care about what's happening and the violence that we're observing, and feel sometimes powerless. And I can only speak for myself, but I began to feel less overwhelmed by like the cruelty that I was seeing when I got involved. Because then I started to feel like, well, at least I'm putting in like my mom says, like mi grano de arena, like I'm doing like my little bit. And it is kind of a rabbit hole, because once you do get involved, then you start seeing things so much more clearly. But I think we all know how unfair and brutal this is, but we're intimidated sometimes by getting involved. And this is just like a really accessible way to get involved that I encourage people to get into. And if it's not here with us, like wherever it is in your community, encourage people to get involved, meet folks, and see what their needs are, and see what you can do to help them thrive.
That's what I fully expect when I go out to the desert with you guys. I don't know if you saw the comments, but it looks like me and Priscilla are gonna be joining you pretty soon. But yeah,
Right?
I hope I fully expect to, get hope. It's gonna be get my ass kicked by the desert, but also get get that bit of hope of seeing people out there doing the important work. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and for everything you do. And I will be seeing you very soon.
Thank you. Let's be in touch. Thank you for having me on, and we'll be in talks. Thank you. I know I'm like scrolling through the comments. Everybody had comments on like, folks that I can reach out to in the Valley. I assure you that I will. And I'm going to check all those out in a bit. But thank you for everyone listening. Let's all be in touch.
Take it easy. Take care.